Hello everyone, my name is the Hurricane Geek. Today we're going to be talking about our updated Tropical Storm Claudette forecast. This was originally forecasted to be Tropical Storm Bill, but Bill formed off our east coast, kind of off the Carolinas, and now that is heading out to sea, becoming ex-tropical. We're going to be talking about our updated cone forecast. I did narrow down the cone and I changed the intensity slightly now down to 50 for the peak, and then making landfalls 50. The timing is still the same, and the cone is generally still the same, bringing it into Eastern Louisiana, but the cone did get narrowed down. So we're going to be talking about the cone, we're going to be talking about the impacts likely from this system, and then we're going to be talking about again, what's going on out there right now. Tropical Storm Bill is now leaving. It's actually a 60-mile-per-hour storm right now. And then our other area to watch down in the MDR, unlikely to develop, but we'll talk about that as well. So again, the main takeaways from my last video are still in place. The system will likely be east-sided, meaning that most of the action will occur east of the center. It means that it will likely stay weak and not become a hurricane. It will form north of the Bay of Campeche, I'm pretty confident about that, and take a similar path to Zeta of last year in the fall of 2020. It will likely continue on a northward path, bringing impacts to eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle Saturday into Sunday. So that's still in place. Now, again, this is the comparison between Zeta and my forecast cone, and you can see it's very similar, with basically a ridge is going to be steering our system, just a weak ridge off to the east, and that's going to allow this storm to kind of curve, but then come back towards eastern Louisiana. That's exactly what happened with Zeta. If you look, there was kind of like this ridge off the southeast coast that kind of wanted to nudge this thing towards the west, but then back towards the northeast. So again, that's kind of what I'm expecting in terms of a path. And again, it could go anywhere in this cone. So going forward, why am I so confident on this cone forecast and the intensity? Well, the LRC indicated back in the fall of 2020, and it verifies with my April forecast and my 2021 forecast video that Louisiana and the Central Gulf Coast is a major hotspot this year. In addition to that, another long-range method called BSR, or the Bering Sea Rule, indicated that the pattern would occur 20 days in advance, and then the models such as the GEFS ensembles are showing a similar track to my forecast cone. Any other scenarios out of my forecast cone likely won't occur, but still cannot be ruled out. But the general path will take most likely what my cone was showing. If we look at the Zeta part of the cycle here, you can actually see how it's been cycling. I showed this on my last video, and this is the latest model run, showing kind of just weak low pressure, but it would be a tropical system at this point, kind of bringing broad impacts. Again, you can see how the isobars here are kind of close together. They're kind of clumped together in this area. So that means we're going to have a lot of wind aloft from this thing heading inland onshore. So we're going to have rip currents, we're going to have probably some storm surge, and we'll have a lot of rain, a lot of flooding to be expected. And again, this place is already very wet in this northern Gulf region, so the fact that it's already really wet here is just going to increase those chances of seeing falling trees and things like that. So that was the cycling, and you could see how there was a pattern there throughout the winter, and now going into the summer months there has been a pattern here. Now if we look at the hotspots, like this would verify with my 2021 forecast video. Louisiana Central Gulf Coast is a hotspot, and then the Florida West Coast down to Southwest Florida is a hotspot as well. Now again, this was something I posted back in April. I talked about this about 2 weeks ago on this channel. I talked about this system or cycling potentially happening. The models weren't even indicating that at that point, and 2 weeks ago I talked about it. This is now looking likely that this will occur mid-June, 17th to 20th, for eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of the Florida Panhandle. So really, New Orleans is in there. Lafayette is right on the edge of that, but I do still expect impacts there. Gulfport, Biloxi, Mobile, Pensacola, Tallahassee will be right on the edge of that, but you could still see some impacts. So again, all these areas could see some impacts, and it's not just the coastline, it's going to be inland as well. So just because you're not on the coast doesn't mean you're not going to see impacts. And then this was the BSR, this indicated it, and you can see this was forecasted 20 days in advance. This was 6/21. It's a little bit late. It looks like landfall is going to be around 6:19 Saturday p.m. What my cone shows, but you can see storm system right up in the kind of in the northern Gulf Coast. So what I'm showing you now is the area that we're watching. This is soon to be Claudette down in the Bay of Campeche, and you can see the temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are running really around 29 degrees Celsius, which is about 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is going to be very warm water to work with this system, and I think the warm water is really going to help develop this system. So I think that's going to be the main contributor to why this thing actually gets a name. The shear will be strong, so that will inhibit development early on, but I think as it's going towards landfall, I think it's going to be able to kind of limit that shear. The dry air, though, will be there as this approaches landfall as well, so that's why I'm expecting the western side of Louisiana, in Lake Charles, for example, they almost likely get the dry air associated with this system. So these are the areas we're watching right now. You can see there's soon to be Claudette down in the Bay of Campeche. That's already quite strong. And again, I do expect this to kind of go inland over Mexico real quickly, but then come back to the north and then come back up and then kind of take a similar path to what my cone shows, kind of like this. And then for Bill, again, that will just head out to sea. And then 94L, don't expect that to do much at all. That's right there. Don't expect that to do much. So this is the European model, and I highlighted some main points for this model so you can see how the system starts and then moves up. Initially, it starts off too far to the west, and you can see right in there, it's trying to pinch off a system and bring it towards the north, but then back towards the west. And again, the LRC doesn't really favor Western Louisiana. It would favor more of an Eastern Louisiana scenario. So if a system starts in the Central Gulf and heads west, it will most likely impact Texas, Louisiana borderline. But if this system heads more towards the east, it would want to take my cone where it goes into Mexico, initially goes into Mexico, and then comes back to the north. It wouldn't want to start down in the Central Gulf and then move this way. It doesn't seem likely at this point. And again, because the main area that's concentrated right now is down in that area. This is the area that we're watching right now, and this is the most likely path. The reason why the European is likely wrong is because it's wanting to try to develop this thing in the Central Gulf, while the area that we're watching right now is in the Southern Gulf of Mexico, and the GEFS ensembles are wanting to develop the area that's in the Southern Gulf of Mexico, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Here are the European ensembles showing the same thing as the European operational run, kind of lowering pressure in the Central Gulf, kind of moving up this way, and then back towards the Texas Louisiana borderline there. It just doesn't seem it just seems unlikely because we have most of the energy right now down in this area. So it would most likely start from this system here. This would be the culprit that would kind of move up and then head back towards Louisiana. Now again, this follows directly with the Zeta cycle, Eastern Louisiana, not Western. So that's why I can rule out the Euro model. Basically, the Euro model is showing Western Louisiana, and I just don't see that likely at this point. I think the main landfall area is going to be probably right in here is where I think the landfall will occur for this storm. So Eastern Louisiana, and then again, the impacts are going to extend well inland. It's going to actually make a sharp turn. So, you know, Gulfport, Mobile are going to be in those tropical storm force winds most likely, or just on the edge of those force winds. So yes, this is something to pay attention to, definitely, and especially with the flooding rains that we could see with this system. Now here's the GFS model, has a better analysis of what will occur, kind of shows it bundling down here. This is the area that we're watching, and then you can see how that kind of just heads into Eastern Louisiana, and then actually this does a very sharp turn back this way. So I think again, the most likely forecast with this travel up like this, come back towards Eastern Louisiana, and then back over, you know, the Appalachians, and then going off the East Coast like this. So that's the most likely path. But again, the GFS has a better handle at what will occur. And if we look at the ensembles, they also have a better handle on what will occur. High pressure kind of steers this thing a little bit towards the west, but then back towards the east, and kind of right into that Eastern Louisiana zone where my cone is going. Now this is just the icon model. This is interesting. I wanted to show this because the trend has actually been now focusing more to the east, and you can see that it was focusing kind of towards the west, 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 and then finally it went back towards the east, and the latest also still shows this thing to the east. So again, the models are starting to change. We're starting to see more consistency. This storm will likely be focused again in this area with the worst impacts in the Eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of the Florida panhandle. I do believe we'll see the worst impacts from this system. If we look at the Canadian model, the trend again has been occurring further to the east, showing Western Louisiana and then a big change back towards the east. Now again, this was my prior cone, so this was my cone from my last video, and you can see the only difference from this cone is that I was forecasting about 55 peak winds. Now I'm forecasting 50. So if we look at the newest cone, 50 is the peak wind, and then 50 making landfall is my expectation. And again, the cone didn't change much. If you look back, this was the prior cone, and then this is the new cone. So really the only thing that I did was change the size of the cone, and I narrowed it down to Eastern Louisiana for a landfall. So I basically just became more confident that this will be our landfall zone. But again, it's going to be a very sloppy system. It's going to be east-sided, and it's going to take time to develop. It's not going to develop immediately. It's probably going to develop as this thing heads towards the coastline. So my forecast shows it developing a little bit earlier, but this could be a little bit later it starts developing. But it could get its act together pretty quickly as it heads towards the coastline. So again, we're going to be talking about the impacts. Tropical Storm Claudette will likely form this week, and then we'll be talking about the impacts. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle will likely see this upcoming weekend, Saturday into Sunday. So you can see this is essentially when it's starting off. So this is going to be around Wednesday morning, and you can see the moist environment this system is going to be in. So, early on, the system is going to be in a moist environment. As this thing gets towards the coastline, though, the dry air could be getting entrained into the center. I'm not too worried about that, though, impacting the system's intensity because, again, this is going to be mostly an east-sided storm. So a system can still strengthen if it's east-sided. It doesn't mean that it can't strengthen any more. So I think we will see, quite moderate tropical storm with this, about 50-55 miles per hour at landfall is what I do expect. And then again, the shear will likely inhibit development early on, but then as we get towards the coastline, I think that shear will start to limit a little bit more, enough where this thing will start to kind of, I guess you could say, breathe and develop. So now we're going to be talking about the impacts from this system. So again, this is moist air and dry air. So this is showing you that rainfall, and this is showing you where we probably won't see much rainfall. So again, the western Louisiana, Lake Charles area, I don't expect much rainfall in that area. The models are still trying to hint at that area being favored. I don't think that's going to be the area favored in terms of rainfall and wind, really. Eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and then going forward, going inland, I think is where we're going to see most of those impacts. So that moist air is kind of in that area there. So this is basically where you could see all the rain. All the rain is basically going to be in this area here. Okay, you're going to have dry air on the backside, and that will likely inhibit it from strengthening into a hurricane, but that dry air will keep things in cap on the western side of Louisiana, so luckily I don't expect much impacts where Laura hit and Delta hit, so that's good. But I do still think we'll see an impact for that area later this season. Sadly, again, Louisiana is very favored this year in terms of landfalls. I expect several landfalls in Louisiana this year, not just one. So again, and this is just a similar path that it could take. This is not exactly my forecast cone. This is just showing you a similar path that it could take. So now we're going to look at the severe weather potential. And again, the severe storms I think will be likely in eastern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and then possible severe storms out of that zone will be also likely. And then even going inland. So this is not just going to end at the coastline. Going inland, there's still going to be a severe storm risk. And this is the sustained winds. Again, in this kind of middle of this forecast where I'm expecting it to make a landfall, that's where you're going to have the highest wind gusts and sustained winds. But the sustained winds out of that could still be strong, could still be, around that tropical depression, tropical storm force wind, and that can bring down trees, because the soil moisture is already so high in this area, because we've been seeing a lot of rain lately. This sustained winds of tropical depression or tropical storm force can still bring down trees, and that could still impact you. So even if this thing is a weak tropical storm at landfall, it will still most likely impact you if you live in this area. You're going to see wind, you're going to see rain, you're going to see flooding, you could see some severe weather like tornadoes. You could see all of that if you're on the eastern side of this system. So again, I would be preparing if you were in this landfall zone and on the eastern side. If you're on the western side, I wouldn't expect as much impact. So Lafayette, I think, is a little bit on the safer side, but I wouldn't be calling it off yet. This is my impact areas. So again, the western side, the green shade will be safe. You'll have gusts of 20 to 30 here and there. You can handle that, and then 1 to 2 inches of rain possible. So I'm not expecting too much flooding in this area. You'll have on and off rain showers, and you'll have minor coastal flooding, definitely a possibility. Now, the landfall zone in the red shade, that's where I expect the landfall to occur, and that's where it could be the nastiest in terms of wind and squally weather. So again, gusts, you could have up to 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts. Again, the sustained winds would be in around the 45 to 50 range. You could have 2 to 4 inches of rain possible. That could be higher, locally heavier. The squally downpours will definitely be there, especially near the center. Localized flooding, definitely a possibility. And urban areas as well, so New Orleans could see some flooding, and then widespread power outages in this area because of those gusts being to tropical storm force. Definitely widespread power outages expected, and then storm surge possible, but I think it will be more likely on the eastern side. So again, the eastern side, the orange shade, will still be very nasty, and I think honestly these are kind of competing against each other. I think the orange shade will definitely be there in terms of conditions. I think it would be just as bad really in the red area with the orange shade because the system is going to be east-sided. So again, the gusts could be right up against that red shade. 40 to 55 mile per hour gust possible. Actually, the rainfall I think will be higher in this area, so 3 to 6 inches of rain possible in this area. Tropical downpours definitely likely. Widespread flooding definitely likely, and then spin up tornadoes in this area too. So you're going to get all of it. You're going to get most likely storm surge in this kind of eastern part here. If you're living on the coastline, you're going to get severe weather, you're going to get flooding, you're going to get rainfall, you're going to get wind, you're going to get isolated power outages definitely possible. And then storm surge again is more likely on the eastern side for the system. And again, the threat doesn't end here; it goes inland after that. So now the inland threat, the yellow shade here. So really, continuing into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and even into Virginia, we're going to be seeing gusts up to 25 to 40 possible, 2 to 4 inches of rain possible in this area. And then again, tropical downpour is definitely a possibility. They may not be tropical as you get up here. So towards, North Carolina and Virginia, I don't think they'll be as tropical, but down here, they're still going to be tropical. And then some isolated power outages throughout this whole area, really. I do expect some isolated power outages because this system is still going to be strong heading up into the eastern seaboard here and into the Appalachians. And in that pink area that I highlighted there, that area is basically where you're going to see all the impacts. So you're going to see the wind, you're going to see the gusty winds up to 40 to 50 miles per hour. You're going to see the rainfall, the heavy rainfall. You could see locally 5 to 7 inches of rain in this area. You're going to see severe weather, so you're going to see brief spin-up tornadoes, and you're going to see storm surge, especially off the coastline. I do expect some storm surge with an eastern-sided system. So again, basically in that pink area, you're going to see all the impacts that you would expect in a tropical system. So if you're in that pink area, I would definitely be watching the system very closely, and I would be preparing for some impacts from this system. Now again, Tropical Storm Bill formed briefly off the Carolina coast. This is now located in this area, so it's heading out to sea. It's actually 60 miles per hour now, the latest update, but it will become extratropical very, very soon, and it won't be a threat to anyone. So it's just a brief, short-lived storm. We had a lot of these in 2020, and I do expect a lot of them this year as well, because we're having a very active year this year. This was a kind of an unexpected brief storm that formed off our east coast. Tropical Storm Bill not going to be impacting anyone. I look for impacts. I look for storms that will bring impacts. I don't really look for storms that head out to sea. That's not really what I forecast, and they're harder to forecast too, these brief spin-ups. We won't have to worry about this system. Now, the system in the main development region, very unlikely to develop, only to about a 10% chance, and again, this would happen Wednesday into Thursday. This was designated Invest 94L, but I don't expect much from this system, mainly because if you look at the recent trends, the trends have been weaker and weaker. So you can see the orange there and the orange and reds there kind of show you that it was stronger. The spin was stronger near the center, and now the spin has been getting weaker and weaker ever since we've been moving into June 15th throughout the day. It's just been getting weaker and weaker. So again, I'm not expecting this to develop at all. The dry air is going to choke this thing and really kill it. So we're not going to really have to be watching any waves off Africa. I don't expect anything impacting the United States from Africa really till the end of June or early August. So we're not going to start seeing impacts from waves really around the early August period. I do expect, though, at least one tropical system to develop kind of in the Windward Island area, Leeward Islands, and I think we could see an impact there mid to late July. So I think we'll have to watch that. But other than that, again, Africa, we're not really going to have to watch until early August. So again, that was my forecast for Tropical Storm Bill. I am expecting about a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm around Saturday p.m. So again, my forecast is still the same, really. The only thing that is different is that I narrowed down the cone to include Eastern Louisiana now. I'm more confident that Eastern Louisiana will be impacted with this system. And again, the forecast cone will likely move to the north, slightly to the west from a ridge building to the east, and then back towards the northeast, making a landfall somewhere in Eastern Louisiana. And again, all those impacts are going to be felt in this area. So even if you're not in the cone going forward, you could still be seeing impacts well inland to the center and then up the eastern seaboard. But again, in this area on the eastern side is where I expect the worst impacts from this system, what you would expect from a tropical system. So rain, flooding, gusty winds, squally weather, all of these things, severe weather on the eastern side, storm surge possible, all these things I do expect from this system. Just because it's a weak tropical storm doesn't mean it can't have these impacts. And then this area has been very wet lately, so I do expect some trees to be down, rip currents, and some inland flooding. So again, those are probably where most of the deaths would occur from the system if we did get any deaths. So just be aware of those things. There's going to be rip currents, there's going to be inland flooding, and there's going to be trees falling down because of how wet it's been in this area. So I just want you to be aware of that. If you're living in, I guess the cities you could say of New Orleans, Mobile, Biloxi, Pensacola, that area, and then heading northbound. So, going into, I guess you could say Birmingham and into Georgia, Atlanta, and then going forward up the coastline, Charlotte, Norfolk, all those areas could be seeing some impacts later on in the period. The eastern seaboard, the Charlotte and Norfolk area will start seeing impacts again around Tuesday, but the Gulf Coast will start seeing those impacts late this weekend. Again, kind of what you would expect from a tropical system, but we could be seeing a lot more rain with this system, especially on the eastern side. So that's the biggest threat that I'm most concerned about, is the rainfall, again, on the eastern side. That's what we should be preparing for, and that's what we should be looking out for. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video when I talk about our next upcoming system that could be possible near the end of June. And this pattern would favor the west coast of Florida, so we'll be watching that very closely, and I'll have an update on that coming up very soon. So thank you all for watching.